So let's just jump right into the stuff, right? Okay. So my question for you is this. I'm going to ask this to you, shout your answers out. When you think about the world's best advertisers, who comes to mind for you? Share some answers in the chat. I want to see who's kind of like top of mind. Best advertisers, who's coming to mind? We see Taylor Swift. I love it. Apple. Okay, Dennis. Yeah, Apple, Nike. Awesome. All right, so we're around the same. We're thinking of the same thing. You're picturing people like Steve Jobs, right? Or maybe David Ogilvy. Maybe you go a bit old school. Or maybe, Taylor Swift, like someone said, or Kim Kardashian. These folks are considered some really smart advertisers. Now, did anybody picture this person? Does anybody even know who this person is? If you do, I will buy you a drink because I bet you don't. This is Ernest Shackleton, and he actually wasn't a marketer at all. He was an explorer, and as legend has it, Shackleton needed to recruit brave sailors to join him on an expedition to Antarctica. So he took out a newspaper ad. And this 24-word ad, which was pinned by an explorer, not a copywriter, is considered one of the most famous ads in history. So it said, men wanted for hazardous journey, small wages, bitter cold, long months of complete darkness, safe return doubtful, honor and recognition in event of success. So this is really powerful. Now, as the story goes, 5,000 people responded to this newspaper ad. That was 5,000 men who were willing to brave sub-zero temperatures and face extreme conditions to make history. Now, this ad appeared in 1914. It is now 2022, and I believe that this ad is actually more relevant than ever. You just need to add one word: marketers. So this is what it feels like to be a marketer today. Oftentimes, it feels a lot like this. And that's because marketers like us are getting left in the dark. So I surveyed hundreds of marketers and I asked them a very simple question. I said, when you started in your role, did your team provide everything you needed to effectively market to the target audience? This is a pretty important question. And guess what? 89% of in-house marketers said no. So in other words, 9 out of 10 times marketers are not getting what they need from their teams. Now, it's actually even worse for marketing freelancers, consultants, ad agencies. Only about 3% of marketers said that they can always get what they need from their clients to do their jobs well. So many of us marketers, we're getting left in the dark, trying to figure out which path to take, a lot like Ernest Shackleton. So Ernest Shackleton's crew, this is the Endurance, it actually got stuck in the ice during their expedition, and they were forced to go out on foot to look for supplies until they could break the ship out of the ice. And of course, they knew that these supply missions, they were going to be pretty scary. So after several hours on foot, one of their crew members, his hood was so covered in ice that he couldn't even see out of it. Now, the food expeditions, they were dark and cold, but they thought they were prepared because they had a compass to guide them. Now, if they worried they were going in the wrong directions, they could pause. They could take a moment, take out their compass. They could find their bearings. And we marketers, we've got a compass too, right? It's our customers. Now, in a perfect world, every marketer would start each project with heaps of audience research. In a perfect world, we spend hundreds of hours gathering data and extracting insight before we actually start marketing. We could conduct customer interviews and run surveys, and we could study our competitive market and sift through all this audience data with a fine-tooth comb. And we'd use what we learn and we carefully plot our next steps. We'd work really smart, strategically. We'd feel really confident in our approach. And we would know for a fact that we were moving in the right direction and we could make patient, consistent progress, right? How cool would that be? Well, guess what? We don't live in a perfect world. We are dealing with the same situation that Ernest Shackleton's men dealt with. We can't just rely on customer insight to always move forward in a slow pace. We feel like we're just jumping from tactic to tactic, copying what competitors are doing, trying to growth hack our way to success. And we're pouring all this money into stuff that isn't really working well. And we feel like we're doing all this guessing about what to do rather than formulating a plan that's based on in-depth research. And that's because in the perfect world, in the real world that we live in, we're getting stalked by this big, hungry polar bear. Now, the polar bear, of course, is not a literal polar bear, although Shackleton's men, they actually did have to worry about real polar bears. Our polar bear, it's more of a metaphor. It's a metaphor for the pressure that marketers feel when it comes to driving results. So guess what? In leaders, they want hyper growth from us. The sales team wants more leads. New competitors come, they steal customers, and the stuff that used to work stops working. So for instance, people say that ad costs have actually doubled for e-commerce brands since the iOS changes, right? So who here feels like they're getting stalked by a polar bear right now? Who's feeling that pressure? Put your answers in the comments. So if there are people here that feel like they're getting kind of chased by this beast and they need to feed the beast, but they feel like they're in constant danger, what can you do? We can't spend hundreds of hours doing in-depth research, not with this polar bear right on our trail. So what can we do? I've spent a lot of time thinking about this problem, and I fully believe that whoever gets closer to the customer wins. But it takes time to get close to the customer, and we're often not given that time in the real world. I'm loving the emojis, by the way, guys. What marketers need, we need something between doing hundreds of hours of research and guessing. We need to quickly figure out what works with customers. We need to get stuff out into the real world so we can test demands with audiences that we think are the right audience. And we need to learn fast. And then we need to double down on what's working, right? We need something in between. Said another way, we need to throw that polar bear a big, juicy steak. And then if we can get some wins, we can get the polar bear off of our back. And we can take a minute, we can slow down, we can do a lot more in-depth research. But first we need to give the beast something good to chew on. So this little meaty morsel here, this is the trigger technique. And the trigger technique is a simple framework that turns buyer stories into smart marketing ideas. The goal is to help you cut through the noise and get to what really matters. What triggers people to buy products like ours? And when you understand the trigger events that are pushing people through the buying journey, and you know how they shop and who they trust and what jobs they're trying to get done, you can market smarter. All right, so you can use this to try to figure out how to get in front of prospects sooner. You can do it in less crowded channels. You can come up with better messages and more helpful content. And really importantly for us, you can stay top of mind, which we all know is really important for us as marketers. And here is the best part. You can get a lot of what you need, even from just one really well done customer interview. And that means that you don't necessarily have to convince your team or your client to let you do lots of in-depth research. And we know that is a major win since they often will say no. All right, so let's get into it. Let's actually explore all of this with my own buying journey. So I bought an alarm clock over a year ago. Now, why did I buy it? I'm a 37-year-old woman. I live in Canada. I'm married. I like drinking wine and listening to business podcasts. I'm active on social media. I follow people like Seth Godin and Amy Porterfield. I like Apple products, and I drive a sports wagon, Volkswagen. So all of these attributes, they tell you stuff about who I am. And this can be pretty helpful if you want to figure out how to get in front of more people like me. But even if you can, what are you going to say? After all, none of this stuff explains why I bought the alarm clock. So if we want to understand why I bought the alarm clock, we need to start by answering 4 important questions. And once we answer these, coming up with smart marketing ideas, it's going to feel really easy. And we're actually going to do it. All right. So first we need to know, what triggered me to begin the buying journey? Well, every customer journey, it's going to be unique. There's often a similar path that people are following. It starts with a trigger event. This is a moment when buyers first realize that they have a problem or a job to do. Trigger events can be situational stuff like getting engaged, having your dishwasher break, starting a new job. Could be biological stuff like being hungry or cold or being sick like I was last week. It could be emotional stuff like feeling insecure or jealous in a situation, or maybe social things like having a dispute with a coworker or a conversation with a friend where they recommend something. That should say social as opposed to emotional there. So trigger events are often painful, frustrating experiences. It is a moment when your prospective buyer first realizes that they need to make progress in some way, but they often don't know their best step forward. So after the trigger event, people will start passively looking for solutions. So they're not necessarily putting energy into searching for stuff yet, but they start to notice things that might be able to help them out that they wouldn't have noticed before. Like maybe they see a post on social media linking to a blog post or a talk like this one. And before that, they might have scrolled right by it. But after the trigger event, now that suddenly catches their eye. So getting in front of people who are passively looking, it's going to help you to get noticed sooner, to be helpful, which we all know that customers really care about, and to build trust, which is super important. Okay, then oftentimes a catalyst will happen, and that's going to push them into actively looking for a solution. So a catalyst could be like something painful, like that happened in their day-to-day life, or it could be something more mild, like a deadline's coming up that pushes them to act sooner. At this stage, they're going to start exploring and evaluating a variety of different options. It's less of a straight line as you often see in buyer journeys. It's more of like this loop-de-loop. We are considering, trying things, exploring different types of options. And before somebody gets to a solution like yours in your category, they might actually look for a whole bunch of other types of solutions, ones that you wouldn't necessarily think of as being competitors. And learning what they consider or try before they actively start looking for a product like yours, this is really powerful information. And here's why. Because once prospective customers start actively looking for a product exactly like yours, that's when the competition for marketers gets really, really fierce and very, very competitive. So, and very, very expensive. All right, so you can ask a company like Casper. They were the original bed-in-a-box company. They did it first. Today, they actually have hundreds of competitors, and they have to pay huge amounts of money to Google just to get in front of people who are already searching for a Casper mattress. Now, we marketers know that customers buy from the brands that they know, they like, and they trust. And if you wait until a buyer is actively searching for a product exactly like yours before you try to build any trust or affinity with them, it's often a race to the bottom. You spend a lot of money trying to get people who have no affinity to you. All right, so let's get back to my alarm clock example. Technically, what I bought was this, but what I really wanted was this. So it was January 4th, and I had made a New Year's resolution to get fit. I bought the alarm clock to help me become a better version of myself, the kind of person who wakes up early in the morning to work out. And while trigger events, they're going to vary from person to person and product to product, you can actually unearth really powerful insights to guide your marketing here. So for instance, look at this. Apparently, I am not the only person who is triggered to consider buying a new alarm clock in January. According to keyword research, searches for twin bell alarm clock, they spike in January. That's pretty cool, right? I see a lot of people talking about the amazing gifts. I want to give a shout out to Sarah Hart, who is on here today. Sarah Hart is the badass designer that does all of my stuff, and she designed this deck. So if you have loved a spread, spread it to Sarah. All right, so marketers who leverage trigger events, they actually spend 80% less on direct marketing costs. That's because those buyers, they can actually time their offers to coincide with their customers' trigger events. So yeah, unless you have money to burn, learning your customers' buying triggers, it actually matters a heck of a lot. All right, so now we know what the trigger event was. Let's move on to the next thing we need to know. That brings us to the next question, which is, why did I buy this old school alarm clock? Or said another way, what job was I trying to get done? Now, we started things off here talking about jobs to be done. A lot of people are familiar with it. If you know about jobs to be done, post like a fun emoji in the chat that like what you think of when you think of jobs to be done, if you're already a fan. For those of you that might be new, jobs to be done is a theory for understanding what drives buyer behavior. As we talked about, people don't buy things just because of who they are. They don't buy because of their like age or gender or job title. They buy things because they have specific jobs they want to get done, and there are barriers stopping them from making progress. So you could say that they hire products to help them become better versions of themselves. If the solution works, they're going to be happy and they're going to tell people about it and they're going to keep buying it. And if it doesn't work, then they're going to fire it and look for something new to hire. So we know about the job I was trying to get done when we bought the alarm clock. If we want to know more, we really need to know the context of my situation. That's what really explains a job. So let's talk a little bit more about the context of my situation. So I'd been using a smartphone as an alarm clock for years and it worked fine. But when I decided I wanted to get up 90 minutes earlier, my phone suddenly became this big problem. With my phone sitting on my nightstand, I would just end up scrolling on social media in bed rather than going to bed on time. And then when the morning came and I was groggy, it was really easy to just hit that big red snooze button and stay in bed. Does anybody know this pain? Has anybody dealt with this? So knowing what we know about like my situation and the context and the trigger event, does anybody know what job I was trying to get done? Who wants to take a guess? Who wants to shout it out in the chat? What was the job I was trying to get done? I'll give it a minute for some answers to come in, and then I will share the way that I'd frame it up. I love all these emojis. This presentation is fire. Better version of myself, get up earlier. Natalia is saying get fit, avoid looking at your phone, exercise, wake up at all, exercise. Okay, these are all good. So I'm going to show you how I would craft this job to be done. I would describe it like this. Force me to get out of bed earlier in the morning when I'm tempted to sleep in. So that tells you a whole heck of a lot about what matters to me, right? That's pretty darn clear. Force me to get out of bed early in the morning when I'm tempted to sleep in. So what makes jobs to be done so interesting is that, well, products, the competition set that you're going up against, technology, markets, all of that stuff can change really quickly. A job is more stable. For instance, people in the 14th century still had that same job to do, but they couldn't hire an alarm clock because they didn't have electricity. So what did they do? Or batteries rather. They would drink a whole jug of water before they went to bed, and then they would wake up in the morning having to pee, and they'd have to get out of bed. So, when you understand what the job is, you'll start to see that jobs are fairly stable. And this gives you like a stable aim to go after as a business. All right, so this brings me to the next question you need to answer, which is what pains do buyers have with other solutions? So as we talked about, buyers, they're going to seek out and try different things before they start looking for a product like yours. And if you want to know how to market to them better, you really should explore what else they were looking at, because that can help you to get in front of them sooner in really clever ways and spend a whole lot less on marketing to people who have no affinity to you. So before I started looking for my old school alarm clock, I actually thought about a lot of different options. The first thing I tried was taking Twitter off my phone, because that was the thing I was staying up at night scrolling. But guess what? That didn't work, because I just ended up going on the browser. Anybody who's ever deleted the app knows that this is exactly what you do. Or I would go on Instagram on my phone instead, and I would still wake up tired. So then I actually even tried this app that disabled the snooze option on my phone's alarm clock. But in the morning when my alarm would go off, it was actually easier to delete that app than it was to wake up. So I would delete the app and go in and set my alarm clock again and go back to bed. So clearly having my phone in my bedroom was not necessarily going to work. So I decided to stop using my cell phone as an alarm clock, and I dug out my old school electric alarm clock. This could work better, right? I'd get my phone out of the bedroom altogether. Now, initially this was promising because I went to bed earlier, but when the alarm went off in the morning, guess what? I wouldn't get up to wake up. I wouldn't get up and work out. I would just press the snooze button like 5 times. So this solution, again, not going to work very well. Amanda says we are very similar people. I know. I feel like this is a very big challenge. So I started looking at other ideas. So I considered an alarm clock rug. This is a really cool innovation. It actually literally forces you out of bed, because the only way you can turn this rug off is by standing on it for 30 seconds. So you literally are forced out of bed. But guess what? It's $120, which is fairly expensive just for an alarm clock. So I was like, I don't know. I need to think about other options. And I considered getting a cell phone lockbox. So this would actually stop me from scrolling late at night, because I'd have to lock my cell phone up where I wouldn't be able to access it. And then I was going to put the lockbox on the other side of my room. So I'd have to get out of bed and open it up. And I thought this might work, but I was worried. What happens if an emergency happens in the middle of the night and I need my cell phone, right? Scary. And also, do I really want to admit to my husband that I'm so addicted to my phone that I literally need to lock it up? Probably not. So I kept thinking about other options. I even considered hiring a personal trainer. I figured it would be hard to sleep in if there was somebody standing outside my door, knocking on it, waiting for me to come down and work out. And guess what? That was amazing, but expensive. So I wanted to see, how can I solve this problem without spending very much money? So when you explore the buying journey and you understand the customer's pains with other solutions, you start to actually get a lot of clarity on what really matters to buyers, people like me, right? So I chose this old school alarm clock because it does not have a snooze button. And it's definitely not connected to the internet, so I can't be scrolling Twitter till midnight. What it does have is this really loud bell that goes off that is so jarring that it nearly gives me a heart attack. And that's way harder to roll back to sleep when you have this like extremely loud alarm clock going off. All right. So we know what my trigger event was. We know what job I was trying to get done. We know what the pains were with other solutions. There is one more important question to answer. What were my selfish desires? So we know people buy things for kind of like emotional reasons, and then they justify those decisions with logic. And if you can speak to the underlying motivations that drive people, what I like to call their selfish desires, you can craft the kind of message that gets people reaching for their wallets to buy your product. All right, so what were some of my selfish desires? Well, I wanted to get fit and I wanted to lose some weight. Why? I wanted to actually feel more confident. That was the big driver. I do a lot of public speaking like this, and I still get very nervous before I talk. I hope that if I like lost weight, I would feel like my most awesome self and just like sashay out onto the stage with like extreme confidence. I also wanted to then have like kind of the guts to pursue my big dreams. I felt like the more confident I was, the more willing I was to go after things. And I wanted to like have a confidence boost. And I also wanted to just like feel more healthy, right? Reduce my stress. I'm an entrepreneur. That can be stressful. Exercising helps reduce stress. I wanted to feel energized when I sat down at my desk. I wanted to be able to think clearer so I can come up with better ideas and better talks. One's better than this one. And I wanted to be more productive. So there's all of these kind of like underlying urges explaining what was going on in my head as to why getting forced out of bed even mattered. So this is some of my selfish desires. So, all right, we can see buying decisions, they're complex and nuanced. Even a purchase that seems as simple as an alarm clock, there are all these functional, emotional, and social dimensions that you need to consider. And you can learn so much by talking to your buyers. Even one interview can give you really rich insights. This is Des Traynor, the CEO of Intercom, and he's applied this at Intercom. They use jobs to be done and customer research to drive a lot of the work that they do. And he says one interview is worth 1,000 surveys. And considering that Intercom is a tool you could use to run surveys, this is pretty powerful. So yes, one interview, you can get a lot of meaty goodness. All right, so we're going to recap here. I love that SparkToro already did this, but the cornerstone insights that you're going to need for the foundation of your marketing ideas are these 4. And these are like building blocks. They're like the Lego blocks, right? And like once you have these Lego blocks, you can kind of combine them in different ways to make different cool, awesome stuff. So here's kind of like the blueprint that I recommend you use. So you start with figuring out who is going to be your target market that you're going to go after with your new marketing campaign. You're going to identify target moments. These are the target moments when you might be able to get in front of people like that. You're going to then brainstorm smart marketing ideas, growth ideas. You're going to take an idea that you like and craft a promise. What's the underlying promise of that idea? And then choose a call to action. So these are kind of the 5 steps to the trigger technique. We're going to go through and we're actually going to do this. Let's come up with some ideas. Let's identify some target markets. It's going to be interactive. So we've got tons of smart marketers here. I want you to be shouting stuff out in the comments. I'll be watching to see what you're saying. And let's go first. We're going to talk about how to choose a target buyer. Now, again, this isn't just going to be us listing out all of the demographic and firmographic stuff, like their age, their income, their job title. We're not going to think about that quite yet. At this stage, what we want to do is we want to be specific about who we want to reach. And this is the part that people sometimes miss, the context of their situation. We want potential buyers. We want them to see themselves in our marketing. And Hunter, yes, B2B is okay. We want them to see themselves in our marketing, and we want to get hyper-focused so we can design campaigns that really resonate with them. Now, if you already have a very clear buyer, which it might be the case for some of you, then I want you to think more about the context of their situation, and that can help you to come up with the target buyer. And if you're still trying to figure out which target market you should be going after, you might want to spend a bit more time here. Okay, so yes.
Hey, Katelyn, can we, let's linger on this for a second. Like, so let's think about the context of the situation using you and your alarm clock as an example. So what might be an example of this?
Let's do it. I'm going to show you what it might be, and then I want you guys to show us. So first, I'm going to kind of go back. Okay, so we've got our alarm clock example, and we want to figure out who we could target. Let's focus on the intersection of the trigger and the job. All right, so we remember the trigger event was I'd made a New Year's resolution to wake up earlier so I could build a healthy habit, right? We have that piece of information. And my job was force me out of bed earlier in the morning when I'm tempted to sleep in. Okay, so thinking about the intersection of those two things. When coming up with the target buyer, I encourage you to ask yourself a few questions that are going to help trigger the ideas for you. So the questions are, when might someone experience a similar buying trigger to what I did? And who else might have that job to be done? Now, Normand already threw out an answer. CEO of an SME who just received nonconformity report for the environment minister. Oh, God. So they would have to get up really early because they have a lot of extra work to do, I'm assuming. Great one. So who else might have a similar buying trigger to mine? Like, when might somebody have a buying experience like mine? And who else might have that job to do? So any ideas? Is there any kind of like potential buyers that come to mind for people? I'm going to show you what mine might be, but let's come out. Someone who just got a job. Erica, I love that way of thinking. Yes, because now they're like having to change their routine. Their morning has changed. Any other ideas? Who might experience a similar buying trigger? When else might somebody else have this job to do? Remember, the job to be done is to force them out of bed earlier in the morning when they're tempted to sleep in. New mom getting kid to school. I love that. New parent. Market over 50 churchgoers who can no longer attend church, attend Bible study. Love it. After a visit to the doctor, awesome presenters, parents who need to organize around kids, busy moms getting the kids ready. All of this is like, I'm eating this up. Okay. So I said this, achievement-minded people who want to start working out in the morning, right? That could be the target buyer. Again, we're not talking about kind of like the specifics yet, but we know kind of who they are and we know the context of their situation. But you guys are coming up with lots of other great ideas. Training for a marathon. I love it. There's a whole bunch we could come up with, right? We could come up with people like this. Students who have an early morning class. Now they can't sleep in. They've got to get to class, right? Or we could go after side hustlers who want a few extra hours of work in the morning before they have to start their real job, right? Those people have these pain points. Or frequent travelers who often fly the red eye and don't want to miss it. Like, suddenly we can take the intersection of the insights we gather through my one story and come up with ideas like this. Very specific people with very specific scenarios, which from a marketing perspective, hey, we can start doing stuff here, right? There's a lot we can work with here. So any other ideas people want to throw out before we kind of move on to talking about target moments? Amanda, do you have any ideas that kind of come to mind for you?
Well, the frequent traveler one was a good one. It made me think about, what about frequent travelers who want to create a semblance of home in their hotel rooms? So they bring their alarm clock from home so that it feels homier in the hotel room.
I love that. And that could speak like that. You could see that coming as part of your promise and your message, right?
Yeah.
Like, that could all tie in. I love that.
Right. Okay. Where it's about waking up, but it's also about ambiance, environment, routine. It isn't just about getting up.
For people like that, when your routine is constantly getting interrupted, being able to have something that feels the similar, even in a very different environment, a different city. I love that. Okay. So we can't necessarily go after all of these people right away with the same marketing campaign, right? Like, they're going to want to see different messages, we're going to approach them in maybe different channels. So because we can't serve all of them, we want to kind of get focused and like limit our efforts initially. And we don't just also want to like arbitrarily choose an audience, but just like kind of like throwing a dart at a board. So I've got a cool resource here that you guys can check out. It's called the Customer Ranking Scorecard. And what this is it allows you to evaluate a number of different audiences on kind of the criteria that matters to you and the criteria that matters to them. So we'll drop a link to that in the chat, and you can check that out. If you're still trying to figure out who your best fit customers are, this can be helpful. So let's put that. Okay, Amanda dropped a link to it. That's awesome. So let's move on though. Let's say that we go after these people. We go after the achievement-minded people who want to start working out in the morning, right? So we've got a very specific target buyer. Now, let's move on to their target moments. Remember, the target moment is, when might we be able to get in front of people like this? Broken link. Let me see if I can drop it and if it works.
Sorry.
We'll definitely send it out afterwards too if it's not working for people.
Oh, thank you, Anthony. Dropped it.
Thank you.
All right, and I'll fix the call to action button right now. Okay.
So, we're going to start thinking about target moments where we might be able to get in front of people. So think about the specific moments, not necessarily the channel, but the specific moments when you may be able to get in front of target buyers like this. So as you're going through this, ask yourself, again, this is where you look at the intersection of like, what job was the person trying to get done? And what were their pains with other solutions? When you think about the intersection of those two insights, it gives you all of this kindling for brainstorming. So ask yourself, how might people look for solutions to get this job done? What else might they consider, try, or buy first? Where might they spend their time? Who might they trust for information, right? So we've got these questions to kind of help us with the brainstorming. There are going to be some probably obvious target moments, like Tara says, when they're scrolling before bed. I love that. You can create kind of like time-based ads that work on time zones. So that can be a super cool way of doing it. So there could be the more obvious ones, and then there could be ones that are like really super clever. So the more obvious ones that come to mind for me, things like, when they're researching how to wake up earlier, right? Or when they're searching for an old school alarm clock on Amazon or Google, because as we learned from my buyer story, that's the language I was using. I didn't know what it was called. I didn't know initially it was a twin bell alarm clock. I started by looking for an old school alarm clock. And then I was like, oh, it's called a twin bell alarm clock. I'll search for that. So these are some of the more obvious ways we might be able to get in front of them. The more like before delivery of kid, new school year, love it. When the summer ads start airing, love it. They trust people who seem really organized and motivated. Yes, yes, yes. Okay. And these are some of the kind of like other target moments that come to mind for me. We get in front of them when they're watching fitness vloggers on YouTube or Instagram, right? They're trying to learn from those people, like Tara said. Or when they're reading newsletters or listening to podcasts about how to build new healthy habits. Or when they're scrolling on Twitter at 1 a.m. in the morning when they should be sleeping, like somebody already said. Or when they're listening to energy boosting playlists on Spotify in the morning because they're tired because they didn't go to bed on time. Or when they're hanging out in Facebook groups for runners or other people who are trying to develop a athletic thing. Or when they're researching other solutions, things like the alarm clock rug that we found was a cool solution, but too expensive. So we're not getting into specific tactics yet. We're just focused on thinking about when we could reach these potential buyers. Any other ideas that folks have, shout them out as we go along. But as you can see, these moments, they are not random. We're actually thinking really tactically. These are really targeted ideas. And when you understand the 4 cornerstone insights and you know who your target buyer is, then you can start identifying these target moments to get in front of them. And you can come up with marketing ideas that are really, really smart. They can get you in front of people before they even start looking for a solution like yours. And you can generate ideas that are not on your competitor's radar, things that they wouldn't even consider. And with a tool like SparkToro, you can identify very nitty-gritty details. And we're going to do that in a minute. We're going to show you how you could use SparkToro to actually get into the weeds and be very specific about the where to get in front of people and who might be the right people to help. So that brings us to step 3. We're going to brainstorm marketing ideas. Now, if you are like me, then you love brainstorming, and coming up with ideas might be easy. But guess what? Coming up with good ideas, really great ideas, that part is not so easy. That can be really tricky. And the trigger technique, it allows you to come up with hyper-focused and timely marketing campaigns rather than just like copying what competitors are doing or using the standard playbook. Okay, so when you're brainstorming these ideas, you want to ask yourself, how might we get in front of our target buyers during these target moments? And based on the job, the pains, the selfish desires, what kind of offer might resonate with our target buyers? So this is like a really good questions. This is a great exercise to do together with other smart people on your team. And you can kind of come up with lots of ideas and then narrow it down to like the one you want to try first. So here's a chance for people to start shouting out some ideas. I want to hear from you guys. Amanda, is there anything that comes to mind for you that like from what we've talked about where you're like, that's like something I might try, or this is something I might try? At this point, you're not focused on like the perfect idea. You're focused on coming up with lots of ideas so that you can kind of drill down to the good ones. Anything that comes to mind?
Let's see. Maybe when someone is researching other solutions that are not this product. So
Mhm.
maybe someone is researching like sports energy drinks,
Ah,
or
yeah,
they're
yeah.
so it's like it's a similar job to be done, right? Getting up in the morning with a different product.
Totally,
Can't be
totally.
one.
People are, and Spotify ads, Am says, I love that.
That's a good one.
Use of SparkToro is excellent. We're going to talk about SparkToro here in a second. I want you to shout out some answers. But so here's an idea that I came up with. So what we could do is we could write a blog post on the dangers of sleeping with a cell phone in the bedroom. Dun, dun, dun. And we could position our alarm clock as a much, much better alternative. And because we know from my story that people in our audience, they might be hanging out on Twitter, we could use Twitter ads to send targeted traffic to this blog post. So we could kind of like see if it's working, right? We don't want to just post it and hope to goodness that somebody finds it one day. We could actually target people with an ad that sends them to that post, and we could see how that's working. So who might we want to target with these ads? Let's say that we want to focus on people who are already self-improvement junkies. Here's the question for you guys. Who influences the self-improvement people? If you're somebody who's all about self-improvement, who are you listening to? I want to know. I've got some of my own thoughts, but I want to hear from the audience.
One thing I want to call out that might be helpful is, it's a related resource here since you said blog posts. Rand has a blog post recently about influence maps. So it's about mapping where your customers are in their journey. And, it's not about the marketing funnel, but it's finding the audience's sources of influence. So I'll drop it in here in the presentation.
Good. I read this. Oh, somebody said James Clear, Dave
James
Asprey,
Clear.
Adam Grant. James Clear is a good one. I think that he could be an interesting because he's very active on Twitter, so we could target people who follow him. Let's go with James Clear. Amanda, can you show us if we wanted to use SparkToro to learn more about people who already are interested in people like James Clear, and we could like kind of pull some insights for ads? How might we do that?
Let's do that. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and take over for a sec. All right. If you cannot see my screen, let me know. But here we go. So let's.
I don't see it right now. I see. Maybe can everybody else see it? I see it showing up as a third option. Oh, there we go.
There we go. All right. I think we can all see it now. So screen sharing my SparkToro.com, my dashboard. So let's do a search for my audience follows this social account. Let's do James Clear. And look at this, everyone. This is a free full query. So for anyone who has a SparkToro account, whether or not it is free, this query is free for you. So you can see all the data here, but I'll take you through it. So the overview data for James Clear. This is pretty cool.
This is very interesting.
So we can see the top words used in these people's bios: founder, engineer, husband, top hashtags used, NFTs, Ethereum. That's kind of funny. But frequently used phrases, mental health. That's a big one, right? Could be relevant to what we're doing here.
And founder was one of the top titles that they call themselves. So entrepreneurial people like me.
Yeah. And then since you mentioned Twitter ads, Katelyn, this might be interesting to do. So let's say you wanted to do your Twitter ads for people who are similar to James Clear or people who follow James Clear. What you can do is you can set up, I think they're called lookalike audiences in Twitter, and you can pull up all these social results. So what you could do is add a bunch of these social accounts to that list.
Very cool.
People who also follow. That would be a good way to, to target that kind of ad.
And what about demographics? Like, because with Twitter ads, you can choose your demographics as well. Like, what else might we be able to learn?
Yeah. So people who follow James Clear, here are some of their attributes: top roles and fields, engineering, operations, marketing, top employer industries, computer software, internet, information technology and services, marketing.
Awesome. I love it. And somebody's asking who's the female version of James Clear, and somebody suggested Mel Robbins. Like, Mel Robbins totally resonates with me. Like, so like you can see how once you start really getting a sense of who your buyers are, the idea of writing this blog post, using Twitter ads to get traffic to it, you can start to think about like, well, who should these Twitter ads target? How do I make sure that those ads are really compelling? And then even with your blog post, maybe you try to go big and you try to get somebody like Mel Robbins or James Clear, and you quote them in the blog post and you mention them on Twitter when you share it. Maybe they reshare it, right? So like you can really start to get a sense of who the buyers are, why they buy, and kind of use some of that to inform your marketing ideas.
Yeah, Exactly. And we can also look at things like the podcast. So people who follow James Clear engage most with these podcasts.
Love this.
Cool. Knowledge Project with Shane Parrish. That totally makes sense, right? The Jordan Peterson podcast, Work Life with Adam Grant, Making Sense with Sam Harris. These are great. But then
Awesome.
what you can also do, so you can put these people, put these podcasts in a list. So maybe you want to make an outreach list of podcasts to reach out to maybe do some sponsorships or maybe pitch yourself as a guest if it makes sense, right?
Totally.
But might be tough to get to secure a sponsorship on Shane Parrish's podcast, right? So, we have a whole list here of lots of different podcasts. You can find maybe some niche ones where maybe they're not doing a ton of advertising yet, and you could be among the first, and it could still be a super engaging podcast for your audience.
You are like reading my mind. So like, let's go back. I'm going to share another couple ideas. And if I just click on my screen, does it open up for everyone? I think maybe you have to do it, Amanda.
Yeah. Here's what do I do? Well, I'm just going to stop sharing.
Okay. And so
Great.
How?
And then I think we just focus your screen. There we go.
Yeah. Okay, so Amanda just gave us some really great tips on how to use SparkToro. We can talk a little bit more about SparkToro as well. So here's another idea. So let's say that we wanted to come up with another idea. Maybe we want to go after fitness vloggers on YouTube and Instagram, and we want to pitch them on a collaboration. Maybe we want to get them to use our alarm clock for a week instead of their old cell phone, and we want them to vlog about their experience. That's an idea we could do, right? Well, for the people who are fitness geeks in the room, what are some popular fitness trends? Things that are like, maybe types of workouts, things that are happening in the fitness world that are cool. One that comes to mind for me is like high intensity interval training, or HIIT. That tends to be a pretty interesting one. Any other fitness trends that come to mind? Shout them out in the comments. HIIT, Hunter's saying, HIIT timed workout, Peloton rowing, all of these things, right? So if we wanted to use something like SparkToro, we could go and we could put in maybe a trend. We could put in like high intensity interval training. And then we could find the people who talk about that a lot and who they follow. What YouTube channels are they watching? What podcasts are they listening to? Who are the people who influence them? And as Amanda said, the thing that I think is so beautiful about SparkToro and exciting is that maybe we can't go after the number one person in fitness to try to get them to participate in our challenge, but we can get the long list of people that might be a smaller and more accessible to us. So it's really cool because now that okay, I'm going to go after people who might be like influencers in the like high intensive training space. Who are those people? You can get this long list. Your work is done for you. Another idea we might be able to do, maybe we want to approach somebody who is both a fitness person and a self-improvement person. Maybe we want to kind of like focus in on that niche, that intersection, and we want to be a guest on their podcast. We could pitch them an angle like something like, 6 bad sleep habits that keep you from reaching your goals and how to fix them. And again, SparkToro really shines here. So who might be podcasting about fitness and self-improvement? Any ideas on the top of your mind? We already saw some that Amanda shared. As you can see, once you kind of start thinking about the first one, you get that big first name, then you can go into SparkToro and you can find all the other podcasts those people are listening to and the other people that you might be able to reach out to pitch yourself to as a guest. So you start to get some really, really clear and direct ideas around how to move forward with these marketing ideas. Now, let's say that we want to go a little bit further in the buying journey. So the ideas we talked about, those first 3, they kind of were all in the passive looking stage of where we might get in front of somebody. What if we want to go after people who are like actively looking for a solution right now? So luckily, everything we heard from the research, that's going to work really well here too. So we have this 4th idea. We could use search engine ads and we could try to get in front of people who are researching how to wake up earlier. We could write an article with lots of helpful tips and educate readers on the importance of keeping their cell phone out of the bedroom. And we could promote our alarm clock as an alternative. And it's actually pretty smart, right? Because according to Uber Suggest, 12,000 people are searching for how to wake up earlier every month. And it doesn't look too competitive to actually rank for this content. The paid difficulty is only 5. SEO difficulty is 10. So this would give us a chance to kind of like educate people who are just beginning the buying journey but aren't looking for a product like ours. And then if we wanted to go after people who were very specifically looking for a twin bell alarm clock, that's when things get a little bit more competitive. So you can see here that the paid difficulty for a twin bell alarm clock is 100. The SEO difficulty is 36. What that means is if we wait to get in front of people who are actively searching specifically for a solution like ours, then it's actually going to be 19 times harder to get in front of those people than people who are earlier in the journey. And that's great to know, right? So we could try any of these ideas. Any of these could work. And all of these ideas are smart and targeted and insight driven. Or maybe we decide we want to go after just the low-hanging fruit and we want to set up an ad on Amazon. So we want to, or sorry, not set up an ad. We want to actually optimize our Amazon listing. Maybe we're already selling our alarm clock on Amazon and we just want to make sure our listing is really good. And so for the case of today's example, let's pretend this is the one we do. Now, if you look for a twin bell alarm clock on Amazon, you get over 40,000 results. And these are some of the products that show up. And clearly they're ranking well on Amazon, but none of them actually talk about the problem that I was having, which is hitting snooze and staying in bed. And so when you get to the product pages for these competitors, you can see that a lot of them are just plain bad. All they do is talk about like the features of the alarm clock. How big is it? What material is it made out of? How loud is the alarm? I read 20 product reviews before I could find one that mentioned anything about how the alarm clock actually made the buyer's life better. Now imagine how you could improve your own listing simply by talking about the stuff that's actually motivating buyers in the first place. So you could come up with a promise that's really compelling and interesting. That brings us to the fourth step in the trigger technique. So we know what pains past buyers had with solutions. We know what their selfish desires are. Now we can speak to how our product relieves those pains and how it can achieve their selfish desires. So again, coming up with our compelling promise, we want to ask ourselves, how can we make the buyer's life better? And why is our solution better than others they've considered, tried, or bought? Now, remember, my big complaint before was that I was sleeping in because I was hitting snooze. So with that in mind, any ideas from the group of what a compelling promise might be for this alarm clock? What might be a really compelling promise that we could use to kind of differentiate our product from others? Showed out a couple ideas.
Maybe the bell sounds pleasant when it rings.
A bell you'd love to wake up to, right? Any other ideas, folks? Never hit snooze again. No snooze. I'm loving this sense of direction. So here's what I came up with. Stop hitting snooze on your life goals. Wake up earlier with this no snooze alarm clock, right? So we're talking about the thing that they actually want, which is to hit these life goals. And we're talking about the pain that they have, which is they keep hitting snooze and not getting up in time to actually do the stuff that matters. And we could really kind of like improve our whole listing. We could say stuff like, stop hitting snooze on your life goals. Wake up earlier. No snooze button means no temptation to sleep in. Super loud alarm forces you out of even the deepest sleep. Silent tick ensures you sleep soundly. Keep your phone out of the bedroom, so no midnight scrolling. Super long-lasting battery. No need to worry about charging or power outages. Stylish design. Looks great on your nightstand. We could talk about the pleasant ticking sound. All of this is actually talking about stuff that matters to buyers as opposed to just the features of the product. And we could use unique imagery in our ad that other people aren't using. So for instance, this is what they're buying technically, but we know that this is what they want, right? They want to wake up earlier. So we could use images in our ads that show the actual goal of what they want as opposed to just the product. And we can craft our alarm clock as the only no snooze alarm clock, right? Other brands are not talking about that. We can be the only one. And that means that we go from being one of 40,000 alarm clocks to the only no snooze alarm clock, which is a big freaking deal from a marketing perspective. It gives us a very unique place to be able to position our product and show people why it's different. So our promise, the only no snooze alarm clock. All right, so finally, we have crafted our promise. The last step is we want to come up with a call to action. We want to give buyers a reason to take action now. So what can we do? If we're coming up with a call to action, we want to know, what do we want buyers to do? How can we encourage buyers to act now? Now, remember, I was starting a New Year's resolution. I wanted to lose weight, and ultimately, I wanted to have this confidence to chase my big dreams. So we could come up with an interesting call to action, something like this. Remember, more people are searching for twin bell alarm clocks in January than any other month. So in the first week in January, we could offer a flash sale, a special Amazon promotion, so that our alarm clock is the one that stands out to them. Aside from our much, much better listing, we're actually doing a deal at the time when they're looking. So again, when we understand our prospects' peak motivation, we can come up with the right type of call to action to get them to move forward. All right, so as I said in the beginning, marketers need something between guessing and doing in-depth research. The trigger technique, it can be the answer. It is a fast and repeatable method for generating smart marketing ideas. And when you combine it with something like SparkToro, you just have so much powerful data and intel to work from. You just need to answer these 4 questions. What triggers people to begin the buying journey? What job are they trying to get done? What are their pains with other solutions? What are their selfish desires? And when you answer these, you can start getting some wins. And you can get everything you need to answer those questions from even just one interview. So you don't have to spend months doing in-depth research. Learn from your customers and then apply what you learn and learn from taking action. And that is a huge win for marketers. With the trigger technique, you can finally get away from getting that polar bear off your back. The polar bear was chasing you, you'll feel like you finally sufficed and he's happy. In other words, you can earn your team's trust and you can look like a total badass in the process. So I hope that everybody enjoyed today's talk. But before we go, I have to confess something. After spending weeks trying to find the perfect solution to force me out of bed earlier, I actually no longer use my old school alarm clock. Why? Because I had a baby. This is Amanda Bourgoin. He's 6 months old and he forces me out of bed much earlier in the morning than I would like. So now I have a new job to be done, a new product that I need to hire. And what I am searching for, it could be described like this. Force me to go to bed sooner because sleeping in tomorrow is definitely not an option. So that's the full circle of my buying journey. I appreciate everyone staying on a few minutes after we were supposed to be done. I'm happy to hang out and answer some questions. And thanks, guys, for showing up and being so awesome.
This was amazing.
It was so much fun.
Katelyn. Awesome. Well, let's get through a couple questions if you have time, Katelyn.
Absolutely. I'm happy to answer all the questions you have.
All right. Thank you so much, Katelyn. Thank you for being so generous with your time. Let's get through some of these questions. So the top voted one right now is, what's the best way to ask customers for the interview? Incentivizing other than money or donation?
So other than money and donation. So when it comes to reaching out, I would say you kind of want to try a couple different approaches. Typically what I'll do is I'll try to identify who are our super fans, if we have super fans, because those people are going to be the ones that you can usually just reach out and say, hey, we're trying to find more awesome customers like you. I know you're a big fan. I'm trying to learn. Would you be open to me having a quick conversation with you about your experience, your buying experience? I don't want to ask you about the product that much. It's more so about what led you to us. People, your super fans will say hell yes to that. And they will usually not expect anything in return. If you are dealing with a client or in your business where you're like, I don't really feel like we have super fans per se, or we're still trying to figure out who the best people are. So we're not going to talk to our buyers. We're not people that bought from a competitor. Then what I recommend doing is reaching out and offering some type of incentive. A typical incentive that I'll offer will be, it could be like a $20 Amazon gift card, although I've been moving away from that option lately because I'm not really big into giving Amazon my money. So the other thing that I often will offer is like a gift card to a local business that they love, or a gift card to their favorite charity. I find that the gift card to the favorite charity donation to the favorite charity tends to work well. If you've tried those things and they're not working, there are actually paid services you can use to get people. One is called user interviews and the other one is called respondent.io. So if you have to go through, just asking and you don't get any responses, and then you kind of offer an incentive and you don't get any responses, try out user interviews or respondent.io.
Something else I've tried, and I'm curious what you think about this, Katelyn, is offering advice or some knowledge. So, if you don't have
100%.
budget for a donation or something like that,
Mhm.
maybe offering like, hey, if you have a marketing problem or a sales problem unrelated to this session, right? It could be anything. I'm more than happy to help you brainstorm some ideas or give you some advice for free. Like
Genius.
something that's, some extra time.
Totally. And that's when because I teach this stuff, oftentimes people want to participate in my interviews because they kind of want to see how it's done. But like what I'll say is like, after the fact, yeah, if you have any questions for me, if there's any way I can help you in your business, maybe introductions that might be helpful to you, like I'm happy to do those. And then people are generally very generous with their time as well. So great point, Amanda.
Yeah. Cool. Next question from Zoe. How does a buying interview differ from a case study interview? Can you combine them?
I would say that I haven't done a lot of case study interviews per se. The master at this, the person I might look to would be Joel Klecky, who has a company called um,
Case study
Case Study
buddy.
Buddy. They do, but from what I understand from talking to Joel about this, they're quite similar. What they're really looking into when they interview people is what were their hangups that might have stopped them from buying, because that can help somebody to understand when they read that case study. Oh, they're like us. They had that issue too, or they were worried about that too. And they talk about, the other options they considered, and then what was it about that option that was the most compelling one. So there's probably a lot of overlap in those styles of interviews. I would say that what is different about the case study is typically I'll find that people might be more closed-lipped about things if it's going to be used in a case study, because they're going to be quoted directly, or their companies. So they might not give you some of the behind the curtain stuff that you're just using for your own internal research if they know it's going to be put into a case study. So you can probably get some stuff that you wouldn't get in a case study interview.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think my opinion is that a buyer interview can inform a case study, but a case study interview probably cannot inform the buyer interview.
Not really. And the other thing with the
That's my
case study is
sense.
typically more time has passed before you'd even reach out to somebody to do that interview, because oftentimes that means the project's done and there was a really amazing outcome. And with buyer journey interviews, I always recommend if you can talk to people soon after they bought, that's really great, because a lot of stuff's still fresh in their mind. So there's that difference too. There might be not as many, they might not remember quite as much if, a year's gone by since the project started and now they've kind of got this great story to tell. They're not going to remember all the details of the buyer journey. They're going to remember more about the project. And those details are less relevant to us as marketers. They might be really, really relevant to product managers, but not necessarily as relevant to us as marketers.
Yeah. The way I like to do this is I like to be able to um, use the buyer interview as an opportunity to build the relationship with that particular customer, and then hopefully get to the case study. So it's more, more in a more timely manner, understanding their pain points, why they converted, why they bought, understand if they have any like current problems that you can help solve if it's related to your product. And then maybe like 3 months, 6 months, 1 year down the line, whenever it makes sense, to circle back with the case study so that it's like, great, now that we solved your pain points and you saw these amazing outcomes, let's do the case study together.
Absolutely. I think people will be like, hell yes to that.
All right. We also have next question. Getting top-down buy-in for this is a struggle. Do you have any tips to get leadership support?
I do. I mean, I'm working more on something around that specifically. I don't have a link to it handy right now, but I've got a script you can use to basically ask to do research without using the R word, as I call it, like the actual word research. And that can help you to get buy-in. What the biggest change that I've made to the way that I talk about this and I teach it is, don't ask to do a bunch of research, ask to talk to one customer, right? Be like, we're doing rapid learning, and we're going to talk to a buyer. We're going to gather a bunch of great insight. And then we're going to launch some campaigns that are experimental. And that the goal is learning fast. And oftentimes, depending on what type of leadership you have, they are excited about moving fast because that's what they want you to do, right? And so I would say, as soon as you start kind of pushing for we're going to interview 15 people, and we're going to do ones for different persona types, and as valuable as that could be, if you luckily have access to that, it's often not the case that you can get that. So I'd say reduce the ask. Don't talk about research. Talk about gathering the insights to create super targeted campaigns that you can outsmart your competitors. Talk about understanding the customer's buying triggers and how understanding those buying triggers actually can reduce your marketing costs. So like talk about the stuff that leadership cares about, which is not research.
That's a good point. And I love your point about having it be one customer, right? And especially with this
Mhm.
framework that you presented today, you can do it with just one customer. For
Mhm.
this specific question, executive buy-in, the way I would think about it too is how you can sort of toe the line between asking for forgiveness and permission. Because I think
Totally.
the other thing too is if you focus on one customer and if you already see the ask with that customer, then you can position it to leadership like, hey, really want to do this important customer interview, and you know what? They're already interested in doing it. So I'm just gonna go if you don't mind, like I'm gonna grab an hour on the calendar and get this done because they already want to help us. They're such a great customer.
Mhm.
Showing that it's that it's easy and already kind of
100%.
like half done.
There's so many great stats. Like Profitwell did this big study, and they found that teams that were talking to doing 10 interviews a month in a non-sales capacity were growing 2 to 3 times faster than ones that weren't. And so there's like kind of data you can use to support your argument. But I like Amanda's point of like, like tee it up with like the person already like, so and so reached out again and they're like a super fan, and I really want to know how we can get more people like them because they're like such a great customer or client. Like I want to do an in-depth interview with her, and this is like, I'll use the insights to put together some cool targeted campaigns. So like minimize the amount of time that they think it's going to take, maximize the amount of how smart they're going to look because you're doing really smart targeted campaigns.
Yeah.
Save
All
them
right.
time and save them money, and they're always going to be happy.
Exactly. There's a quick SparkToro question that I'm going to go ahead and answer. It is from Joe. How does SparkToro connect all of these personal attributes together? E.g., how does it know number of years work experience for James Clear followers? Good question, Joe. So all the data that we present is based on publicly available information, de-identified and on aggregate. So in this case, we've crawled, millions or billions of websites and so including social profiles, and we gather the data once we have a meaningful sample, right? So sometimes you might run if you run like a super niche query that doesn't have a lot of search results. We're not able to provide the data because we don't have enough publicly available data to present it to you. So publicly available data, we triangulate and connect the dots where we can. That is the magic of SparkToro. All right. Next question here. Maybe we'll do 2 more questions.
Mm-hmm. And
If you
any
have
other
a
questions folks have, we don't get a chance
Yeah,
to get to them, shout out on Twitter and I'll answer
yeah,
them there.
cool. Super generous. All right. If you have a business service rather than a product,
Mhm.
does this change the technique? Oh, that's a good
I would say
question.
no. It depends on how you typically would market because there's still going to be really good insights that you're going to be able to pull. So for a lot of service-based businesses, not all, but a lot of service-based businesses tend to have word of mouth being a really important channel for them. And so what you can, you might have a sense of like, these are the types of tactics that tend to work for us, but you're still going to learn so much from your customer interviews. They're going to help you to shape those offers better. So maybe it's using more compelling messaging if you have a referral program. Maybe it's knowing who is more likely to come into your referral program. Maybe it's knowing, maybe you learn that you thought you were only competing against other, printing companies in your area, but you're also competing against like somebody you hadn't even considered, and you could go after people who are searching for that solution. So for service-based businesses, it is still very applicable. It just might mean that the many different approaches you could take with a product-based business or internet-based business in particular, you might have fewer kind of like tactical things you focus on, but the strength of those offers will be so much better because of the insights you get from this research.
Great. And then our final question here. Um, what about when you're in the proof of concept phase? How to interview prospective customers when you're still working out details of the offer?
That's a great question. So this, the trigger technique could be very useful for you to come up with a test, an offer to test, to experiment, to see if people are even interested in the thing you're thinking about building. So for instance, if you had done this interview with me about buying an alarm clock and you had a completely really cool new solution that is not exactly like a twin bell alarm clock, you'd learn a lot from talking to me about what might go into crafting your new product. And you could also then learn that maybe you set up a landing page and you drive traffic to it to see, do people want to sign up to learn more about this thing when it launches? Are you describing it in a way that's really compelling to them? Are you targeting the right people with that offer? So even before you start building out your new thing, you can take the insights from one of these interviews and you can use that to kind of shape your offer. A lot of people, when it comes to interviewing people who aren't your customers, I have kind of a rule of thumb. Talk to people who are either, bought from you. Those are the best people. People who, or people who kind of went far in your kind of sales process. And if they ended up switching and buying to going from somebody else, those can be really interesting people to learn from too. Talk to people who bought from a direct competitor. That's somebody who does the same thing the same way you do. Or somebody who bought from an indirect competitor. So another solution they might get the job done. And the last one, which is not the best one, but it's the one that sometimes you have access to, are people who put their hand up and say, this is a problem I'm trying to solve right now. The reason it's important to talk to those people versus talking to somebody who fits some kind of persona of who you foresee your ideal buyer being is that if somebody has not actually been actively in the buying journey, then they're going to have a lot of opinions that are completely irrelevant to you because they're going to go, oh, you should think about this. And did you ever consider that? And but if you don't want to learn what their opinions are because you are the creator who's innovating and coming up with this new solution. You really want to learn about how they think about the solution and how they shop and what they're actually doing. Because so often people will, they will go after somebody who they'll talk to a bunch of customers or prospective customers. They'll give them all of this really clear answers. And then when they build that thing that they said that they wanted, nobody buys it. And that happens a ton in the innovation world. The other resource I would check out if that's your case is the MOM test, which is a really good book on that specific thing. It's okay, you've got an idea. How do you not bias the people you talk to? And how do you actually learn things that are helpful in helping you to build the right thing? So my talk today is a lot more about the marketing side of things, but you can learn a lot to inform product as well. But that's not really necessarily the use case I talk about. But the MOM test is really good for that.
Great answer. There's a last one that I want to answer here from Jock Stender. Please discuss the utility/wisdom of including in a marketing program SparkToro's freemium monthly access for subscription websites. I believe it is smart, low risk, and welcoming. All right. So I think the question is about the utility of having a freemium offering. So for us at SparkToro, we really want this publicly available research, right? This publicly available data to be accessible to everyone regardless of budget. Same time, we are a business. We need to, and data is really expensive because we do pay for that. So that's why we have paid offerings. But with our free offering, they're free accounts. So you get 5 searches per month and you get a sampling of most of the data. I believe we do not provide the data for podcasts and YouTube channels, but you can still get a solid sampling of text insights like words used in bios, frequently discussed phrases, hashtags used, websites frequented, press, influential press, and social accounts. So at least if you're not sure about using SparkToro or if you just want to get a sense of it, you can still get some valuable data there and get a sense of influential websites that you can consider doing some targeting with or consider reaching out to for guest posts and things like that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, as somebody who does not have a a SparkToro account right now because I'm not working with clients, I can tell you as soon as I started working with a client, it would be the first thing I would sign up for, because like it makes you look like a genius to your clients. Like you can come to them and say like, this is what we know about our audience, and they are reading this, and like the depth of the granularity of the recommendations when it comes to podcasts and YouTube channels, like it would take you hours and hours and hours to do that research and identify those folks. And for most people, if you want to become a podcast guest or you want to work with a YouTube influencer, you're probably not going to be able to afford the number one podcaster in the category you're doing, or you might not be able to pitch yourself as a guest there. But if you go down to like number 40, the person that has probably 2,000 listens per episode, which are still your people, that person might be really open and welcoming to have you on as a guest. And it would take you so much effort to find that person if you weren't using a tool like SparkToro. So like if I were doing marketing work for like clients or I was in-house at a team, it would be like the number one tool I would have right away.
Thank you for that. And to your point about podcasts too, I mean, we are still in the very early days of podcasting, and we know that there's a lot of drop off in podcast publishing just after a couple episodes. So at this point, if you have a podcast and you're getting, I believe, if you're getting like more than 300 downloads per episode, you're already in the top 1% of podcasts.
Really?
Mm-hmm. That's
wow.
Yeah. I mean, of course, there's in that 1%, there's that huge discrepancy between a 500 download per episode podcast and something like My First Million. But if you have a podcast and you're getting a few hundred downloads, that is solid. It's still an influential podcast, especially in that niche. So as you are considering podcast to sponsor or pitch yourself on, you don't have to don't think about it as like, oh, can I get to the one that has 10,000 downloads per episode? I mean, maybe you can, that's great. But if you're getting to one that only has a few hundred, that's still a really solid option.
And the other thing to consider, and I mean, this is why I'm so bullish on the trigger technique, is like, it's one thing to like pitch fitness people. It's another thing to pitch fitness people with a topic that your audience is going to be interested in. And during that podcast interview, to know what your key talking points are that you want to hit, because they're compelling with your buyers, right? So like, I think a lot of times people go, okay, I want to do podcasts. That's like the channel they want to be on. And I'm going to talk about, sleep, because that's like relevant to like I'm going to go on all the sleep podcasts. Well, guess what? There's probably a small number of sleep podcasts, and their audience, while those people are really obsessed with sleep, might not be the ideal buyer for you. But the people who are kind of like the self-improvement junkies, sleep is one of the components of things that they're interested in. Going on something that's kind of like a broader podcast topic, but is going to be relevant to your people, and then knowing how to craft your title of what you recommend they use for a title on the podcast, how you answer questions, all of that insight comes from really understanding the buyer's journey. And there's lots of stuff. So I feel like SparkToro helps you so much in figuring out where you should dig in, but you still need to know what type of content and information is going to be really, really relevant when you get on that stage.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we should wrap up here. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you for being generous with your time. Katelyn, thank you for joining us. Thank you for this incredible presentation, for kicking off the new year with this kick-ass presentation. This was awesome. Let's see, next steps. The replay will be available on this website as soon as we wrap up here. We will also send a recap email, I believe, including the slides. We'll see. Also, for Katelyn, follow her on Twitter. She is at Kate Bour, Katebour. Subscribe to her Customer Camp newsletter. It is incredible. Can't believe the insights are free. So you can subscribe on customercamp.co. Is that right, Katelyn?
Gotcha. And if you visit my Twitter profile, the link is there as well to sign up.
Awesome. Any parting words for us, Katelyn, or should we peace out?
I would say if anybody thinks of ways to be able to go to bed sooner when you have an infant waking you up very early, send those to me. I would love to hear them.
Yeah, revenge procrastination is real.
Thank you so much, Amanda. And like Amanda said before we started this, she said, we have the most off the hook community. Like our people are so good and they're so smart. And I'm like, this is one of the best communities I've ever done a talk in front of. So thank you for having me and just being your amazing selves.
Oh, thank you, everyone. This was awesome. We'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.